precisa, madura, digna, noble, cuando nos llegue el sufrimiento. Me parece que así vivió Cristo. El resto de su vida, les repito, él vivió una vida muy contenta, muy feliz, muchas veces alegre. Él fue a fiestas, él tuvo muchas amistades, tuvo amigos. Él no fue un hombre solamente triste, fue un hombre de una vida muy plena. This mission church, San Francisco de Asís, was built in 1710 by the forefathers of the people who are attending Mass here this morning. It is a mother church. It's our most beloved religious shrine because it is a hub of Mary, which comprises Rancho Taos and Taos here, Mora on the other side of the mountain, and Chimaya to the right of the side of the mountains. This is a motherland of 92% of the people with Spanish last names who live in Colorado, and also many who live in California and Wyoming. These people are by far the oldest European inhabitants of this part of the Southwest. In 1535, a man named Coronado explored and mapped this land and claimed it for Spain, but he left no people here. In 1588, the Spaniards tried to conquer England, and they were defeated in the Battle of the Spanish Armada. Then the Spaniards came to realize that they no longer ruled Europe, that there was now a growing balance of power there. Spain knew that unless she put people on the land she had in other parts of the world, she might lose her claim to these lands. For this reason, in 1598, or 10 years after the Battle of the Spanish Armada, the Spaniards sent my forefathers to colonize northern New Mexico. Unfortunately for my forefathers, Spain lost much of her power in Europe to England and to the Netherlands, and she had to, for all practical purposes, abandon my forefathers in northern New Mexico for 3 centuries. This isolation of 3 centuries was very, very important in the history of the New Mexico settlers. Their isolation from Spain and northwestern Europe did much to form them into a people who even today are different in serious ways from the person whose formation is primarily Western European American. Given the fact that they were going to be asked by history to live in a very highly organized technological America, this isolated, rural Indo-Hispanic background did not prepare them well for many aspects of American life. They did not develop the needed skills in political organization, business, or technology. Technologically, for example, in 1910, when the United States and Europe already had at least primitive airplanes, movies, automobiles, typewriters, sewing machines, phonographs, the telegraph, and many other technological extensions of man's physical power, my grandfather was still using his plow and this pitchfork in my valley. In this courtyard, we have 3 headstones. Gomez, Sanchez, and over there we have Romero. These are some of the more common Spanish names in the valley. Most of the settlements in this valley have Spanish surnames, and they are names of family. And until about 1900, most of the people who came from Spain in 1598 lived in family villages. The grandfather, his brothers, the women they married, and the relatives. Between this dark hill and this mountain range, there is a settlement called Torres, which was one of these family villages. This dirt road to the right of the golden tree leads to a settlement called Vigil, because that is where the Vigil family lived. We also had Córdoba, Medinas, Velázquez, Madrid, and Garcia. Just living by our people and family settlements also had much to do with their conditioning. With what they became in the past 200 years and what they are now. For example, this explains very, very clearly why these people did not become highly organized people. This explains why even now these people have, in many instances, a difficult time becoming comfortable with institutions. To be institutional just was not their past. The Western European man long ago became accustomed to living in a society which is made up of pressure groups, protective societies, political institutions and political parties, financial combinations, labor unions. The Western European man developed this protective, highly organized way of living because he needed this lifestyle. He recognized that he was surrounded by many people who were not relatives, and people who were not always friendly. In his situation, he felt the need for protective societies, for protective institutions, and he formed these institutions well. When he came from Europe to this country, he brought his knowledge and skill regarding protective societies with him. In contrast to this, the people of northern New Mexico and southern Colorado lived a family existence. And when you live almost exclusively with family, you do not need a Republican or Democratic Party. You don't need the AFL-CIO or any other labor union. You don't need mayors, you don't need governors, you don't need police departments. As a matter of fact, in many instances, we did not even have currency, money. If my grandfather had corn and children, and my dad did not, then my father had corn and children, and vice versa. The fact that we live in a kindly, gracious, cooperative family environment taught us that we did not need protective societies, so we did not form them. And the result was that we did not gain experience in using them for our benefit later on. This living in family groups also conditioned our people to be relatively non-competitive and non-acquisitive, non-materialistic. I say relatively because all men are competitive and acquisitive to some degree, but there are great differences in degree. This, for example, is why these people are not very economically expensive. If you live in a family village and you buy a piece of cloth for 6 cents and sell it for 12, often whom do you make a profit? Some cousin, some uncle, some grandfather. Even today, very few of our people are merchants. Also, if we are talking now about serious competition, when there's serious competition, people lose seriously. And in our villages, if a man competed aggressively, whom did he defeat? Once again, a grandfather, a cousin, an uncle. We did not have to compete aggressively to live well, since we lived among gracious, kind people in a cooperative society where everybody helped each other. We were not wealthy, but we had enough to eat. We did not have to scramble. We did not have to exploit people. If persons among our people had a talent, they would not charge their neighbor for this talent. They would not package this talent into wealth or excessive power over others. All in all, the attitudes, the language, it was Spanish, the music, the diet, architecture, the pace, were very unlike what was soon to surround these people. Let us mention the special form of religion my people had in those times. Each extended family had its own chapel, and each family conducted its own religious services. This chapel was built for my mother's family by my great-great-great-grandfather in 1816 in Chimayo, New Mexico. This man, Bernardo Aleta, and his oldest daughter are buried under the main altar here. The altar is an example, by the way, of the famous vivid two-dimensional dye art which my people developed. At times, their art took the form of an icon or figurine, but it was always religious art. A very important change took place among our people between 1598 and 1910, and I think it largely had to do with geography. When these people of Spanish background came to northern New Mexico, they were certainly very inquisitive, very aggressive people. But when they were found, when they were surrounded by the Western European urban technological man, beginning roughly in 1848, the person the Western European man found was a very passive, relatively non-inquisitive person. Not only had these people been isolated, but they had been isolated on a land which is very harsh and unproductive. Most of New Mexico and southern Colorado is high and dry land. Since they had no external stimulus, no capital, very little technology, on this harsh land that they were forced to live on a basic subsistence level, they had very few surpluses. A few sheep, a few goats, 2 or 3 horses, a few cows, a large garden. And with that, they learned to get along very well. So what had happened, in effect, is that in 3 centuries, these people had been transformed from a very aggressive, very acquisitive people from Western Europe into a pastoral, semi-agricultural people who had an Indian Spanish culture and an Indian attitude toward wealth and toward the use of the land. For them, the land was not primarily an economic commodity. It had economic importance, of course. It was their livelihood. But for these people, land also had a mystical value. They saw themselves as guests on the lap of Mother Earth. And they made the act of faith that Mother Earth would be a good hostess, that she would take care of them, would sustain them, wherever they were born, wherever they lived. And their role as guests was to use the earth, nature, well. As polite guests, they would rearrange Mother Earth as little as possible. It would be as unobtrusive as it could be. I am convinced that my Indo-Hispano ancestors were natural ecologists. I would say that the main characteristic that the Indian part of our families gave to our Spanish part was this reverent attitude toward nature, toward the land. When I was a small boy, my father would take me on nature walks, and he would teach me to know and use and respect the plants, the earth, and the water. We would always stop at a certain stream to drink, and before my father drank, he would kiss the water first. This was his way of saying grace. In general, one cannot talk about these people unless one speaks also of the Indian. And the Indian influence is present in the attitude toward nature, the architecture, and in the blood. Most of the ancestors of the New Mexico people have some Indian blood. Some have a lot of Indian blood. We are very complicated racially, though. Some of our people have no Indian blood. Some are Teutonic, some Mediterranean Spanish, others Semitic, because the Moors were in Spain for 6 centuries, and they got their bloodline there. And just as we are racially diverse, or very different, we have some very strong cultural differences within our own group also. Within this one group, there are many differing attitudes and desires. Differing because our individual experiences in America have differed from one Spanish-speaking person to another. To simplify, some of us lean very heavily in favor of the Indo-Hispano-Mexican culture. Others embrace this culture, but equally strongly, the American Western European culture, and so these people are very, very strongly bicultural. And some identify practically not at all with Indo-Hispano-Mexican culture. I have been emphasizing in many ways the handicaps of having been an isolated people. Handicaps there were, but I would like to point out just as strongly that in their isolation and poverty, my forefathers developed a life that was wonderful in many ways. Poor they were. I have said that they never had much more than was absolutely necessary to live on. But they were a very noble and happy people in their poverty. Life was that way then. When you had a few animals and a forest in which they could graze, and out of which you could get timber and fuel and also hunt, and when you had streams in which to fish, had a garden, and you could live. These people were not faced with an accelerated inflationary economy, a dual economy. And since the huge majority of the people in the area were quite poor, Each person was looked upon as having dignity. No one was looked down upon or rejected for economic reasons. And this mass acceptance developed healthy personalities. Also in their poverty, they developed a very tasteful, very artistic society. They surrounded themselves with an environment that was not only gratifying socially, very cooperative, friendly, and responsible, but also very beautiful physically. The state of New Mexico recognized and honored this artistic sense, this culture. At Santa Fe, the state capital, most of the important civic buildings, state and federal, are Indian Spanish architecture. So are the schools, the churches, many of the most impressive business buildings. On the main street in downtown Santa Fe, by city law, one must build Indian Spanish architecture. In 1848, the Americans conquered this land, and the main effect of the conquest of the Southwest was that this lifestyle I have been describing came to an end politically. Between 1598 and 1821, these people were Spanish citizens in name. I say in name only because, as I have explained, for the most part, Spain was not here to help us or to hurt us. In 1821, Mexico revolted successfully against Spain, and by this revolt, Mexico won the Southwest, which for the most part, Mexico did not take advantage of this victory as far north as northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. I would even suspect that many of the people I have been talking about did not know back in 1821 that this war had taken place. Such was their isolation. The change of governments did not affect our people that much. The war that did make a difference was the War of 1848 between the United States and Mexico. This was the time of President Polk, and he was talking about manifest destiny. He was saying that it was clearly the will of God that the United States should be one nation from the Atlantic to the Pacific. For this reason, he picked a war with Mexico. It was a war the United States could not lose, an economic war. General Kearny was sent out to be the enforcer, and with him came surveyor generals. They analyzed our land after the war and decided they could use it profitably in three basic ways: cattle and sheep, timber, and mining. The Western European American man came to our valleys and prairies as he wanted our land economically. To my valley he came in 1910. The Colorado Fuel Land Corporation and the Rocky Mountain Timber Company decided to develop the timber mining in the area. Between 1848 and 1910, the Western European man, by very, very questionable legal and economic means, took 31 million acres of land away from our people. When we lost our land, in many instances, our men would work in the coal mines or the timber or cattle industry. At this period of history, our people were still very happy, because although in many instances the land was no longer theirs economically, it was still theirs psychologically. They still had their basic life patterns, their family organization, their recreational systems. But the really serious problems of these people began 40 years later, when the coal mines closed down. Many of our people had moved into company housing, and when the mines were closed, the housing was destroyed. So now these men and their families had no job and no home. At the same time the coal mines closed, the cattle and timber people began doing their work with machinery. They mechanized. This meant that they no longer needed our men to do their work. This is why, in 1948 and 1954, more or less, our people began a mass exodus from rural New Mexico and southern Colorado to look for their livelihood in other places. Some went to southern and northern California, others to Arizona. Some came to Denver, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and Greeley. Still others went to Wyoming to work in the sheep industry and in the coal mines that had not yet closed down there. Life asked these people to make a drastic change very rapidly. The new life was so different, so confusing, so discouraging. So much of what they had learned in their old way of life was no longer of any use to them. The change literally unhinged many of our people. Many a very fine man who had been adequate to his situation, a good father, a good husband, a productive worker, in the coal camp west of Trinidad, or the lumber camps in rural New Mexico, or on the cattle ranches. When he came to Denver, to this very different lifestyle, to a very secure way of living, he lost his grip on life. There were so many instances in which they did not know how things were done in Western European American society. Also, since they were new people, they had no connections in their new environment. This lack of knowledge about the city and the lack of connections handicapped them badly in getting jobs, or good jobs. At best, they were able to work on someone else's farm, the poor paying jobs on a railroad, or the foundries or meatpacking plants. This, I would say, is one of the main reasons why back in 1960, the family with a Spanish last name made $2,000 a year less than other people who live in cities. I would mislead you if I gave you the impression that none of our people found basic happiness in their new environment. Many of them did. And any history about them that did not stress this point would be incomplete. What is more, many of our people, the middle-aged and the young, are rapidly learning the political and economic skills that their parents did not have. If men like this one have their way, the children will have fewer of the limitations and barriers of the first two generations out of New Mexico and southern Colorado. So many of our people work so hard toward this end. This inner city teacher is beautiful, but very, very tired. As a people, we have so much thinking to do, so much analyzing, so much selecting. We have to put together the knowledge and skill that we already have with the knowledge and skill that we do not yet have. We have learned, for example, that the majority is seldom sensitive enough to the needs and suffering of our minority. We know that most of our Spanish-learning people are touchingly kind, likable, and generous. All of my life I have been surrounded by these precious people, so I know. But the new environment has taught us that to be precious is not enough. These precious people so many times in so many ways have been ignored or exploited or abused by people more powerful, more organized than they. So we know now that we must organize, that we must get power, political and economic, and other forms of power we do not yet know about. This we already know. But we have not decided yet about all of the ends for which we will organize. And there's so much we do not know yet about how power is gotten, and not only gotten, but kept. How much power do we need? And regarding people who do not have a Spanish last name, in certain situations, can we share power with them, or must we take it completely? It is true, not all people who do not have a Spanish last name are insensitive and greedy. There are good people who do not have a Spanish last name, many of them. Then who are these good people? And how much of their power and skill will they share with us? Enough? Who are the indifferent ones? How do they fit into our situation? And who are the greedy ones, the distorted ones? Many of us do not know yet how much work and time and energy it takes to compete for many of the most valued things in this society. And especially what it takes to compete against the distorted people in society. And is it true that only he can compete successfully against the distorted who is willing to himself become distorted? Or what is almost the same question, if we consistently face up to the distorted ones, can we keep those marks of the personality that most made our children and adults of the past precious people? We will do well in this job of thinking deeply and making hard, delicate choices because we come from noble people. Our Indian Spanish forefathers were the compadres. of my people. And the project of the people who don't have the Spanish last name in Colorado is to understand